Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in today. We air our show every Tuesday on LinkedIn at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have you ever wondered why women of color or diverse backgrounds suffer from imposter syndrome? An article written by Rushika and Jodianne Burry stated that imposter syndrome is loosely defined as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. It disproportionately affects high achieving people who find it difficult to accept their accomplishments. Many questions whether they're deserving of accolades, from Obama to Sheryl Sandberg, COO of FBI, of Facebook, not FBI, but of Facebook, whom have confessed to experiencing it. You might also be wondering what this has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. This illustrates the impact of systemic racism, classism, xenophobia, and other biases that are categorically absent when the concept of imposter syndrome was developed. Many groups were excluded from the study, namely women of color and people of various income levels, genders, and professional backgrounds. Today, we have many special guests. I want to thank you again for all coming today, welcoming my share on imposter syndrome and how it wears on our mental state. So, what causes imposter syndrome? Renette Archer, August Gill Apparel, was founded in 2020 amid a pandemic and racial unrest. With a need to rediscover who she is as her true self, Renette found she had been muting, that's a good word, muting her authentic voice and masking her as a Black woman, a daughter of a Belizean immigrant, an East Side Detroit native, a mother and wife, initially crafting messages to wear as a cue to have the courage to speak up in her way and to be true to herself. Renette found she was having more conversations about her story. In doing so, others were requesting shirts of their own, and August Gill Apparel was made. Renette, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's such a pleasure to have you. So, when we talk about imposter syndrome, what do you think actually causes it?
Mm, I think there's a lot of degrees to it. I know for me, I think it just stems back to even just childhood, and how I know I was raised in my household. And I guess what I mean by that is, I think self doubt is natural. We all have it, but it's responding to that and knowing how to come across on the other side of that. But I know personally, I was always taught that you just push through, you get through it. So even when I would have those self doubts, it was never discussed, it was never talked about. So then it's like you learn from the people you're around. So once I, got into the workforce, I'm around people that don't look like me. So then that self doubt really increases to where I think that imposter syndrome comes into place because now I found myself, you know, I know you did a show a while back about code switching, but I also found myself trying to fit in because I was the only. So then, in trying to do that, it made me feel as though, well, if you have to work this hard in order just to have a seat at this same table, maybe you don't belong here. So I
Mm,
think it's a lot of factors that go into it.
right. And when do you think how did you make that switch? When did you tell yourself, what was your process like when you transitioned, for instance? Or is it something you're
Yeah,
still continue? Is it something
definitely.
that's ongoing?
Definitely ongoing. And I think for me, the biggest one was when I realized I was teaching that to my children. When I could see some of the things that I was doing, they were starting to do and not being their authentic selves and doubting themselves. For instance, my middle daughter, straight A student, she's in fifth grade, has always been a straight A student. And I remember her third year getting that award. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. You're so smart. And she's like, well, I don't really know. And it was just kind of this, no, you are. Like, you deserve that. You worked for that. So for me, that was my, I guess, my light switch moment to where I have to change if I know I want to see a change in them.
Right. Absolutely. I see all of you shaking your heads. So I'm going to go on and we're going to thread from that, Renette. Dr. Kimberly Sanders is the founder of Sisters of Hope and Faith. Was exposed to this depraved underworld through her years of volunteer work and treating victimized patients. She was moved to help these women. Her journey involved years of research, various workshops, and interviewing women imprisoned for their heinous acts as they were forced into. Although organizations providing help existed, she found that something was missing to prevent these women from returning to their painful yet familiar lifestyle after incarceration. Sisters is filling that gap by providing high quality outreach counseling, employment, housing, and other basic needs. They provide the practical assistance and resources needed to help these women regain their rights, their dignity, and rebuild healthy lives. By partnering with other organizations and law enforcement, they are creating impactful changes needed to abolish this modern day slavery. Dr. Kimberly Sanders, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Welcome, and thank you for having me today on this platform.
The pleasure is all mine. So, when you think about imposter syndrome, what do you think causes it?
I would say again, well, for myself, I think it would probably start back from childhood. Stereotype, being, I know from most families, especially mine, as being a female, you were taught to how to kind of keep your, disregard your opinion. Your opinion was disregarded, or, kind of second guess a lot of things that you might want to do. And even when you felt like that, kind of put you in a position where you kind of just overlooked it. So I think basically from youth, stereotype, and just being just what we grow up, the process that we grow up in, or the family environment that we grow up in, has a lot to do with it as well.
Right. And do you think this is something that's ongoing for you, or?
Oh, yes, indeed. I spent years in the corporate field, having to sit on board with, where I was the only female with like 48 other males, with 48 males. And so, yes, and I feel that it's an ongoing thing for me, even now with sisters. I sometimes doubt, my success. I have some kind of, maybe have a fear of, will I succeed or fail in it? So, yeah, it is an ongoing process and something I deal with daily and have to work through.
Right. What's your process? What are the solutions that you think? What happens during your process, and when do you know it's actually occurring?
Well, what I do is kind of just start to remind myself of the things that I have accomplished, the good things that, over the years that I have contributed to, helps me a lot. I even have different support systems that I turn to and kind of, confide into. And one of them is basically my faith-based community. Helps me kind of see and remind me of the good that I've done in the past and that I'm continuing doing. So it helps me to stop second guessing myself. And I'm a person that believe in perfectionism, being perfect with things, doubting myself, am I doing this? Or feel like things are, if I don't do it this way, I'm not gonna succeed. So just having a strong community and being able to reflect on the things that I have done good, it helps me daily.
Right. And that community is also helpful to lean into,
Right.
right?
It is.
Absolutely. So we're going to thread from that. Rashida Hatchett is an award-winning nurse leader on a mission to help women thrive in the workplace and beyond. She is a resilience strategist assisting organizations to build resilient teams that win through her signature programming. The power of organizational resilience. Rashida is a best selling author, an experienced and engaging speaker. Rashida, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for coming. And what do you think causes imposter syndrome?
Well, absolutely, like both of the ladies already discussed, there's the way that we grow up, the way that we're programmed to deal with life and to show up in life. Women are often programmed to show up in a way that we shrink. We're not being our authentic selves. We're not showing all that we are. We don't learn how to express our value in a way that it gives truth to who we are and what we do. So part of that is the way we grow up. There's other pieces to it that often things that happen to us throughout life and the people that are in our lives and the voices that speak into our lives may have given us some ideas that we aren't as great as we are. And those ideas began to be internalized by us. And then it becomes our voice. Then we are talking ourselves out of success. We're talking ourselves out of the next thing. We're talking ourselves out of being proud of what we've done and what we've accomplished. So it kind of is a trickle down. It starts in one place and then it just sort of begins to move throughout and kind of weave itself throughout everything that we're doing.
Right. Yeah, it has a trickle effect and it seeps into all other areas of our relationships too and our personalities.
Absolutely.
Cassie, I see you shaking your head. Cassie is the co-founder and CEO of Zap Life and its sister company, Zap Theory. Cassie brings many years of experience, both as an educator and in the finance world, to these current endeavors. Cassie's intrinsic curiosity that in 2017 led her down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and ultimately inspired her to co-found her first blockchain startup. She teamed up with several other blockchains evangelizes to found Zap Theory, a social token platform inventing use cases unprecedented in the blockchain. When the COVID-19 pandemic emerged on the scene in 2020, it was Cassie's innate love for music that inspired her to team up with the brilliant founders of Zap Life, a social experience for the creator economy, where creators and viewers can generate abundance and mutually benefit from content creation. Cassie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. So, what do you think causes imposter syndrome? And, after this, I'll open the platform for everybody to have a regular discussion.
Sure. So I think the word weave woven back into our lives and our personalities, I think that was a really great description. I think for me, it's been that I've been given so many opportunities that I don't necessarily feel deserving of. And rather than just being grateful for them, there's those doubts and those thoughts that come into mind that somehow not worthy just for being. And so one way that I correct it is self-talk. And I started to discover it through, there are lots of audios that you can do, but also just writing and doing exercises to talk to yourself like you would your friend, right? You wouldn't talk to your friends and say that they're not worth it, you're not good enough. So talking to ourselves as we would our best friends.
Right. And do you think that, and anybody can answer this, are women more likely, you think, to experience imposter syndrome?
I think so. I think women. I think we are. And I think, again, it comes a lot to how we was raised, being a young girl and being able to kind of maybe second guess yourself, or, your opinions maybe didn't matter or kind of overlooked. So I think that we are more prone to that, and because we do wear many hats, and we want to make sure that we are um, doing our best no matter what we're doing. So I do think we are prone to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to take that even a step further, is the way that society views women, the way that they judge all that we do. We hear about getting mom shamed, we get body shamed, we get life shamed, right? And so the way that that happens, it causes you to often feel like what you're doing isn't enough, even when you are going above and beyond, even when you're giving it everything you have, you can still feel like it's not enough, because there's this judgment that happens out in the world with kind of all that we do. If you're a working mom, there's a whole segment of foolishness that happens when you're trying to navigate that world. And how do you do both? And how do you have a thriving family and a thriving career? So I think that women often are subjected to more criticism. And so because of that, we internalize more of it, and then it becomes our own voice. And we're beginning to hear our own voice telling us it's not enough, it's not ready, do more, perfect it a little bit more.
Absolutely. I totally agree that society's limitations seep into our minds. And so I get on phone calls sometimes from our Instagram DMs. And so I'll schedule the calls and I'm like, they definitely think this is a man. They're going to like be surprised that it's a woman. And then I'm like, wait, no, I know my stuff. Like I am confident with competence breeds confidence. And so I just have to remind myself, like, I know what I'm talking about. It's okay that I'm a woman. And let's just push through. So.
Right. It's interesting because I heard a little bit of, and I think we probably all suffered it or probably still go through it. Like everything in our lives is really a journey. Perfectionism. Perfectionism, right? Perfectionism affects imposter syndrome. How do you think it does that? How do you think that it's interwoven? One is interwoven into the other.
I think wanting things to be perfect makes us think that it's our own high standards, right? So if it's not exactly what I see for myself, I know it's not where I want it to be yet, then that makes me feel like a fraud, right? Where I'm like, okay, so this isn't exactly everything that it needs to be. So it's really helpful in community to get feedback. So like my platform, for example, with Zap Theory, it's a startup and it's not exactly where we want it to be yet.
Right.
When we get feedback like, wow, this is so awesome, we love what you're doing, it's like, oh, it's so good to hear, And so sometimes it has to be, well, that doesn't have to be, but sometimes the external is what helps with it as well. But I think that internal dialogue of it holding up to our standards.
Right. Renette, how do you think that the two are interwoven into each other?
Yes, I definitely agree. I think it's, and going back to just, it being a perfectionist and again, having some self-doubt. So when I started August Gill Apparel, so my career is in HR. So it has nothing to do with the company that I started. So it was definitely a lot of self-doubt there. Like, do I even belong here? And even now, when I put my name on a lot of things, going back to your question of, is this something that, women maybe see a little more often than men? I just use my initial. I do R Archer. I don't put my first name Renette. And I think that has a lot to do with, having a seat at the table. It's like, I feel like, okay, if they don't know if I'm a male or female, it gives me a little more credibility. And again, not to say that that's reality, but I think just putting that on myself and even launching my website, it was like I wanted everything to be so perfect. It's like, and I unintentionally launched my website and not knowing what I was doing. I hit the button, made it live, and next thing I know, I was getting orders in. So that's really how it started. But I think just getting in my own way, wanting everything to be matched up so that I can feel like, okay, now I belong here. Even though I'm a small business just starting out learning, it was just that wanting everything perfect and thinking I'll never be able to be successful in this space.
Right. How do you push through that?
I'm just learning just to do it.
Yeah.
And I think too with my designs, because again, it started as therapy for myself. So just in a lot of my designs and some of the sayings that I have, I think that in itself, I feel like a fraud if I can't even hold true to what I'm putting out there. So it's really forcing me kind of outside of my comfort zone and just pushing through it. And I think also in having conversations with my kids, they're able to call me out on some things, which is great. Like I don't like to say calling out, but I say calling up. So they call me up on things. It's like, hey, you're telling us this, but we're not seeing you do it. So yeah, it's just I've just been going for it. It's uncomfortable, but I'm doing it.
Right. It's interesting. You said calling up, and it's also a way to be held accountable because we always want to know where it is. I think the best is really from our kids or an accountability partner, where someone could say, "Hey, Cassie," or "Hey, Renette, this is what I noticed," and then you can actually catch yourself, rewrite the story, rewrite the dialogue in your head, and then, like you said, just push through because like you said, it's funny you said when you clicked on live to publish your website online, and I think there's also a fear of being judged, right? There's a fear of being judged, and I feel it every Tuesday that I come on live, and sometimes my finger is like live, no, yes, no. Is it gonna work? Am I gonna say something that's not gonna be right? And then like you, I just have to just do it, and then you think how much further, right? And it's not to say that our experiences were not worthy. They did bring us to where we are today. But now that we keep pushing through it, I think that's all we need to do is to continue having the conversations with ourselves and then our kids to keep pushing through it. So I agree. You just have to keep doing it and give yourself grace. I think that's something that we don't do. We don't give ourselves enough grace. Dr. Maisha actually has a comment here, and we were talking about that last Friday. So she says it's interesting that we feel we have to push through it. So she said, I think it's important that we begin to understand that perfectionism and fraud are inherited conversations that we can begin to separate ourselves from. And then she puts great conversations. Right. And it's a process. Thank you, Dr. Maisha, for your feedback. So do you think that any of you can answer this? Do you think that you fear success? Dr. Kimberly Sanders, do you think you fear success?
In some ways I do. I feel like, because of how I am, I sometimes doubt myself and feel that I might fail. But if I'm doing something that I will fail in or something, so I do at times do fear success.
Right. Rashida?
I have a little bit of different language around that. I don't think it's actually the success that we fear. It's the change that comes from the success. Yeah. It's the unknown of what's going to come from leveling up, right? So every time we level up, there are things that shed. It's a part of growth. And so there are people, those are the hardest to think about. The people who came with you, they aren't going to go with you because they're not a part of the new vision, right? And they don't want to be. Which is really the big part, is that they don't want to be a part of the new vision. So the people, the activities, all of the things that we do that are inside of our comfort zone that are going to shed when we level up, there's a little bit of angst there when we're going, what is my life about to look like? It's going, as I know it, this thing is going to change and morph, and it's going to look like something different. Am I ready for that? Am I ready for different, right? Am I ready for change? So I think it's the change that we are a bit more apprehensive about. It's not necessarily the success. Most of us see ourselves wherever we see ourselves, in the boardroom, running our companies. We envision that. But the change that it's going to bring, the growth that we're going to have to do at every up level, that part is the scary part.
Right. Yeah, it's Cassie. I want to thread from that, but Cassie, I'll leave it to you.
To that, just like all this. Yeah, I don't necessarily fear. Well, I guess it's like I'm doing the talking myself out of the fear of it, because I don't like to live in that space. So for me, it's like, if I'm successful, then that means that thousands of people are getting to generate abundance from the work that we're doing, you know. So being in a space and always continuing to, like, the things that I do with my day being things that uplift others is my goal. So if I'm not successful at that, then that's more scary to me. Yeah, but I think I understand the question too, but I think I just always tend to talk myself out of the fear of success, and remind myself right away that is impacting thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, to be their better selves.
Right. And to be more authentic.
Absolutely.
Right. I think it really boils down to being authentic and to be able to have the conversations with others, to have a peer group that understands you, that pushes you, not the peer group that brings you down another level, one that brings you, up a level, and to hold you to your standards. And I think it's pretty important to have those standards and to live by them. I'm not saying it should be perfect, but to have the standard, right? To have the standard, to live by it. Because I totally get where you're coming from, Renette, as well, and Cassie, in talking yourself out of it and then just pushing through it to get through it, to be able to overcome that obstacle, because they tend to be pretty big obstacles. And when you're catching yourself in dialogue, that's something that's pretty difficult to do if you're not aware, right, Rashida? So once you're aware that you're actually having that mental dialogue, then it's to switch the story around and to switch the dialogue, and like you said, Cassie, to talk yourself out of the fear, so you're not in that space, and then flipping your story and saying, well, I could bring so much more to so many more people that are going to benefit from what I have to serve. Right. So it's Precious. Hi, Precious. Thanks for tuning in. She always comes into the session. She's like, I love these sessions. Yeah. So I think it's pretty important to, and that's probably where the next question ties in, how do you overcome imposter syndrome? And that's probably one of the ways to talk yourself out of it. I have affirmations. Someone earlier in I think it was Cassie who mentioned it, writing or journaling. And there's affirmations. So on my phone, I have reminders. I am enough. I am brave. I am courageous. And I have them set, one at 9:11, one at 12:12, or, and then I might not look at it all the time, but it's a reminder that I need to remind myself that this is me, and I have to switch it up a little bit to be able to brainwash myself that, this is going to be the new dialogue and the new story that goes on from now on, so that I can continue succeeding.
Yeah. You're changing your language.
Yes.
And that's the most important part of doing away with imposter syndrome in those moments when it comes, is shifting your language. Your voice is the most important voice that you have. It's not anything anybody else ever said to you. It's everything that you personally believe about yourself, your abilities, and what the world has to offer you, right? And so when you shift your language around who you are, and you come into this place of knowing, because you've done that work to affirm yourself that I am enough. I am ready for who I'm meant to serve right in this moment, right? You've done that work. Now it's a game changer. Now you've opened yourself up to receiving and expanding, and, expanding your territory, being able to touch more people like Cassie's talking about, reminding yourself that the work that I do is important, and I'm able to touch more people when I show up authentically who I am.
Right. And
yes, I was just going to say we need
all of that. I'm like, oof, he needs to go to church.
Right.
absolutely. I think since the murder of George Floyd, we were very uprooted, and a lot, oof, there was a lot of, how can I say? I can't say experiences that we had lived that surfaced. It shed light, right? It shed light on, okay, this is what's been happening to our ancestors and our great grandparents and our parents and us. What is it that we can do? And I think there was a process with that, because I remember when he was, I have never watched the clip, and I didn't go online. I didn't look to find out how he was murdered, but I think there was a process that I had to go through. So I had a lot of anger, and I wanted to march the streets, angry. And then I was sad. And then the sadness turned into passion. And then the passion gave birth to what I'm doing today. So it's being able to say, I am angry or I am sad and I'm going through this, but constantly transitioning and shifting, like Rashida was saying, you have to change the language. So I had to change my angry language, and then it changed to a very depressed language. And then that depressed language changed into a very passionate language. So I think we need to be able to go through those processes and not be so hard on ourselves. I mean, before these shows, I didn't know what imposter syndrome was. I just thought I had low self-esteem, So you think in retrospect, like, what is it that brought me here today? What lived experiences did I go through that made me who I am? Why am I speaking? Everybody was saying, and Dr. Kimberly Sanders, you said the same thing. It stems from childhood. Something someone said, how they said it, you internalized it in a way where it created self-doubt. And then that just becomes your story. It becomes a filter that you start living through, right? It becomes your filter and your reality. So I completely believe that we can overcome imposter syndrome. And, I think at one point, like, Renette was saying about her kids, it's important to hold ourselves accountable. It's very important to hold ourselves accountable and to have our children, or peer groups, as I like to call them, hold ourselves accountable so we can catch ourselves in the moment, go through it, and then be able to serve in a better light. Right. So what's your takeaway having this conversation today, Kimberly?
Well, for me, it's just, it amazes me after you really look at things, how many women today are actually being faced with this. Me for myself, I kind of thought, it was something that I was just dealing with, but actually being here, knowing that there's others that face the same issues. helps me a lot. And also taking away that just having to let go of feeling like that I have to do everything perfect. Knowing that, if I fail doesn't mean that, I still have accomplished things in the past. I shouldn't go in doubting, not wanting to try something because of doubt. So I have to let that go. That there is other people out there like myself that faces this women that you can have as a support system as well that can help you through this, and that it is something that we work on daily and that we can overcome, just having the right tools to do so.
Right. Right. Exactly. Malika. Hi, Malika. Thanks for tuning in. She says here, sometimes it is childhood. Sometimes it is the microaggressions or blatant criticisms that make you our less than.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes it's society. It's those things that are happening outside of us that tell us that we're not good enough. I think about the young lady, the African American young lady that tied in her school with a white student to be valedictorian. Well, she originally had more points than the white student, and the parents of the white student said, "Hey, no, we need to reevaluate these points." And then they took the points away from her so that she was no longer able to be the valedictorian, and they made them co-valedictorians or something of that nature. And so when we begin to enter into those things, right, those things are happening around us, they're happening to us. How can it not make you feel like what you do isn't good enough? I can have a 6.0 GPA and it's not good enough for me to be valedictorian by myself, right? Solely alone, I earned this. So if that's the case, and we know it is, it happens all the time with multiple things. Our hair, for instance, forever has not been good enough, and it needed to be straight, and it needed to look this way or that way. If that is the kind of system that you grow up in, how can you not feel as though you're inadequate in everything that you do? Because it's a trickle down. It's not just going to stay with the hair, it's going to move and morph into every part of you, where you are second guessing what you look like, what you say, how you show up, what career you have, what path you're on, because there's that constant level of criticism that happens even within our community as well as outside of our community.
Right. It's interesting that it's within the community, and it's I'll go even deeper. It is within the community, but I honestly think it stems back from colonialism.
Absolutely.
They pin us during colonialism. They pinned us against each other.
Absolutely.
And fled the countries.
Mhm.
So while we were fighting with colorism between us, among us, it's exactly what it was meant to happen. Historically, that's how it's happened.
Yeah.
And I remember I was bullied forever in high school, and I wasn't bullied I was bullied by my own people. And I remember as I got older, it took years. It took so many years to understand what stemmed from the bullying. And then I realized it was because there's not that unification. In order for us to thrive, we have to thrive together within and amongst our own. Understand that we do come in different shades of brown. And I had to explain that to my daughter the other day. We come in different shades of brown. Our hair texture is different. Some is puffy, some is curly, some is long, some is short, some is natural. We just have to embrace it all. Right, Renette? She said that you said the same word. I read your lips. We have to embrace it. She said something the other day, and I said, "Oh, so it was, we now we live in a more diverse community, but before we lived in a community that was not diverse at all. So, she had a lot of problems, or not a lot of problems, but she questioned who she was. And she's only 6. And so she was questioning who she was at 3. And it was, yep. And it was about her hair and the color of her skin. And then I realized, okay, something needs to be done. Something needs to be changed. I remember calling my mom and hysterically crying because I didn't think that this would have happened to me. And she said, well, your princess books need to be princesses of color. And then she started naming books that I wasn't exposed to. And she said, just go on Amazon and get, representation. She needs representation. So 3 years of sifting through the books, getting new books, and now she can identify with, with girls of color, girls who are of color like her. And the new thing, which I was like, there's a God. She's got this mass head of hair like you, Cassie. And I always pushed for her to rock her curls. And while she was 3, because she didn't go to a diverse school, she wanted it pin straight. So she'd pull it for it to be straight. She'd pull it back in a ponytail. She'd want every little single strand inside that elastic. And yesterday, she was on the phone and she said, I have one grateful thing, because we do 3 grateful things at night, everything. And then I said, well, what's your grateful thing? And she said, I have puffy hair and I love it. And literally, I thought, if I've done anything, because this motherhood is really difficult, but if I've done one thing, this is it, because she needs to own it, right? She needs to own it. She needs to have representation. She needs to be reminded. And she needs, like all of you are saying, she has a voice at the dinner table. She's expressing her opinions. Sometimes she might be loud and I'm very tired, but it's okay. She can be loud. I never shush her, because that's something, as Caribbean or Black American households where, shh, you're talking too loud. Shh, you're laughing too loud. Cross your legs or go sit down. Or there's always a, you're pushing the person. Yeah.
Something
right?
to quiet you, something to shift you into obedience and subservience and a corner. But nobody is going to put baby in a corner.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think it starts, and I think the in order to overcome it, we have to be able. Malaika said something very interesting here before I go on. She said it's not just in our appearance, but in our speech and our cultural perspectives and how we process information from our diverse reference points. Lack of neurodiversity acceptance also contributes to feelings of inadequacy. Children on the autism spectrum are treated differently than their white counterparts. Yeah, it's the lack of neurodiversity. And it's true. And I think that's where it definitely stems from. Ladies, I want to thank you so much. I'm speechless that you all, accepted to come on the show, and I'm humbled. Thank you so much. And my keynote is that while I tried to limit my own bias as much as possible by interviewing only women I did not know and sticking to the same set of questions for ongoing interviews, it's impossible for me to remove my own personal experience from this discussion altogether. Without it, I would have not been able to undertake it in the first place. The continual theme surfaced that if true equality in the workplace is what we are after, we will have to tackle the issues that are distinctive to us. And especially in the workplace, we need to recognize that we're not alone. I know many of you are having these transparent conversations and courageous dialogues with the people around you and trying to figure out how you feel about all this. It would help if you pondered that change starts with us. How you resolve those questions will always be distinctive to you as women of color and diverse backgrounds. Again, give yourselves the space and grace. What's important, we've been talking about process for this whole show. What's important is that it's crucial that you go through that process. And while enough of us just do that, over time, we will continue having a united front. Transparency and authenticity is key. We need to be true to ourselves. We can fundamentally create that transformation. Take those drawbacks and turn them into something of value for others. Give yourselves some grace and space. Ladies, Kimberly, Rashida, Ranette, and Cassie, thank you so much for constantly tuning in and for your feedback and for coming today.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, ladies.